We've had great guests today, but our next guest has been extremely progressive this offseason.
He really has, and I'm hoping, forgetting the football talk, that he could send us a nice picture of sunrise out in San Fran, because we're about to get hit with another nor'easter out here. So we've asked, starting the show this morning, for people to send us pictures of sunshine or nice weather, and
just something besides a foot of snow coming
this is
way.
a guy that can do that right now.
It is.
Where he is.
Because it's getting depressing here, John. John Lynch, general manager of the 49ers, joins us. By the way, true story, first time I ever met John Lynch face-to-face, it was during his playing days after the Pro Bowl. He and his family were checking in at the Four Seasons in Maui down there, the Grand Wailea, and I was on the island. We said hello for the first time. Speaking of sunshine, so John, that's just so you know, that's always the way I'll remember our first face-to-face meeting in Hawaii, so that's always a pleasant memory.
Those were the good days, man, when the Pro Bowl was the Pro Bowl and the Pro Bowl was in Hawaii, and, oh, man, those were fun.
That's the way it's supposed to be. And the way it's supposed to be for the San Francisco 49ers is one of the winningest franchises in the history of the NFL. And, John, you and head coach Mike Shanahan heading into year 2 have done a ton of things to make sure this team is back up and running. Kyle Shanahan, excuse me. Where do you see this team going forward? Because expectations are now something you're dealing with in San Francisco for the first time in a lot of years, John.
No, and that's exciting. I mean, first and foremost, I would speak to that, about the Niners being an iconic organization. That's really what drew Kyle and I to this organization. I think the fact that we had an opportunity in our minds to come and try to revive one of the organizations in football. When I was growing up, when I was in college and playing at Stanford, this was the place in the NFL. It was the place that did everything first class. They were winning championships. Of late, they've fallen on some hard times. I felt like we had that opportunity. I had an opportunity to come in with a guy like Kyle that I really believed in. And we're real proud of the work we've made in year 1. Now we head into year 2, and we understand we start all over again. And, we also build upon what we've been able to do in the first year. And so, we just are kind of wrapping up with free agency. And like what we've done there, Weston Richburg at center, Jerick McKinnon at the running back position, Jonathan Cooper yesterday at the guard position. We felt like we addressed free agency, before it ever happened with our own guys, signing Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously a huge deal at quarterback, and Marquise Goodwin at wide receiver. We're really proud of the moves we've made. We think we've bettered our football team, but we know the work is just getting going.
Talk about the moves up front, because that's really kind of been the talk for the last 2 years. And old linemen, the big uglies, are loving it. They're actually the sexy position right now, and it's for the first time in probably a lot of their careers. And you mentioned it. You get Richburg from the Giants to come over there. Cooper, who was a first-rounder, blew his knee out in Arizona, had a couple of stops latest in the Cowboys. You pick him up, as you mentioned, yesterday to vie for one of the guard spots. So talk about that offensive line and just how important that is, especially in the game today.
Yeah, especially in the game today, and especially in our division. That's one thing when you look at us, we closed fast and all that. You've got to own your division if you want to get to the playoffs, if you want to win championships. And we weren't very good in our division. And when you look at our division, there's guys like Aaron Donald come to mind, and we got beat up in the interior at times last year, and so we had to fortify that. So it was something we were looking forward to doing. Weston Richburg was a guy we started studying a lot and became enamored with his ability to fit into our scheme. I think that's one thing we have in Kyle. Even though he's a younger head coach, he's been in the same system for years upon years, and his dad was in that system before him. So that's what he's been around. So he has a really good eye for what fits. And so oftentimes, although Weston was a guy coveted throughout the league, it's not so much what everyone else is seeing, it's what we're seeing as a fit for us. But his ability to, as a center, to be strong at the point, but also get out and run. Our center, we ask him to do a lot of running, get it up to the second level, and we feel like he's a tremendous fit. Jonathan Cooper is a guy that, I remember when John Elway had me in to kind of partake in the Broncos offseason years ago when Jonathan was drafted, I believe in 14. He was thought of as the best guard prospect in years, and he fell upon some hard times early in his career with injuries, as you mentioned. But we've really felt like kind of settled down last year in Dallas and really played some good football. Again, we think he's a really good fit, but in our division, we'll see what happens up in Seattle, with if any of these guys land up there, but you better be good in the interior. And so we feel like we have strengthened our position there.
Well, one of the reasons you strengthened that position is because of the position you paid behind those guys, and that would be quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo. As GM of the 49ers, John Lynch is with us. Listen, were it not for Kirk Cousins' new deal in terms of average value, Jimmy Garoppolo would be the highest paid player in the history of the NFL, with a guy who's had 5 starts with you, John, and a couple obviously in San Francisco. What did you look? He was great down the stretch for you guys. He changed the team, no question. What did you see in those 5 starts since he came over at the trade deadline last year that you knew he's our guy?
You know what we saw, Trey? We saw a guy who made everybody around him better, and I think that's the mark of a great leader. That's the mark of a great quarterback. When everybody on the field, when your cornerback is a better football player, it's hard to understand how that equates, but it does. When he came in, everybody was better, and I think I don't want to lessen the impact of the rest of our team. We had a lot of young players. We battled through some injuries. At the same time Jimmy went in, we were getting healthy, and young guys were getting experience. But the fact of the matter is, we saw it. He made everybody on our team better, and I think that's a quality that the great ones have. Jimmy's got there's not a huge sample size, so is there some faith involved in our decision? Absolutely, but we believe in the guy, and for Kyle, I think the thing I would tell people is, Jimmy, we made the trade, but then there were some days that Kyle Shanahan was like in mourning, because I think everybody knows his master plan was to have Kirk Cousins come in eventually. And right. I think, I was proud of Kyle, because I think he knew that this was the right thing for our franchise, and he didn't hesitate. But then, even then, Jimmy had to really prove himself. And, Kyle, I think I think it was really smart. He didn't play him right away. He waited till he had some semblance of an understanding of our scheme. When he did put him in, he put him in a position to succeed. And then I would tell you that Jimmy really impressed Kyle to the point that he said, "This is our guy." And we're excited in that he really didn't have a thorough understanding of what we were asking him to do. He kind of piecemeal game plans that we were putting together. And so our thought process is, if he can go through in a complete offseason and really master this system, it can get even better. So we just got to keep adding talent around him, and we're very excited about his future.
But as former defensive players know, defense wins championships. So, as a former defensive player, obviously yourself, we're talking to John Lynch, 49ers GM, 9-time Pro Bowler as a safety. So the defensive backfield position, you bring in and sign Richard Sherman, which certainly, if he can come back from the Achilles injury and be close to what he was, you're going to get a heck of a player. But the process was a little different. Something none of us were used to when each of us were on the field playing is players negotiating their own contract. So can you kind of take us through how that worked when you're used to dealing with an agent? Now you're just dealing with the player speaking for himself?
Well, it was different, to say the least. I think about a week prior, we had agreed to a trade for Aqib Talib, and right. That didn't work out for, Aqib. It's not that he didn't want to be a Niner. Kyle and I actually, with permission from Elway, got on the phone with Aqib, and he didn't like the whole idea of getting traded, not having control over the situation. And if he was traded, he wanted to play for a couple people that he knew real well, Belichick or Wade Phillips. We talked to him. And got him excited about the Niners, but ultimately, he wanted to back up the Brinks truck, and it wasn't making sense,
right.
And so we moved on, and I've always been a believer that, hey, things happen for a reason. I was trying to figure out what that reason was, and when Richard Sherman became available, I said, okay, here we go. Here's a player we really covet. We understand that he has had some injuries, and at his age that can be tough. But, I think the first thing we did was get him on the phone right away, right after he was released. Kyle had some questions he wanted to go over with him. He wanted to get to know the guy. I had known Richard for years, back to his Stanford days. Kyle and he got together And the next step, I was actually down for my daughter's birthday in San Diego. And so I said, okay, it went well. I'm flying up the next morning, and we're going to try to hammer this thing out. And so we went into my office. I'm sitting here right now, and I kind of have a couch set up over there. And Parag Marate, our contract negotiator, does a brilliant job. And, Richard sat on the couch along with his fiance, Ashley. And, the first thing was, hey, man, I've been in your position, and, we would love nothing more than to get a deal done today and not let you leave the building. But I also understand, hey, this is the first time you've been a free agent. You may want to take trips, but just know that we're here for you if you go do that. But our preference would be to get this done. And he said, first thing he said is, no, let's get this done. This is where I want to be. And so then we left the room, put together a contract proposal, came back in, and went to battling. And, there's been a lot of commentary as to whether he got a good deal or a bad deal. I would tell you that, we felt like he did a great job representing himself. His wife, Ashley, pretty darn good agent, too. At one point, we were stuck, and she came up with a great comment to move the thing forward. And I was kind of in there. I usually let Parag handle most of these things. I'll get involved in the beginning and the end. I felt like I was the bouncer because I thought Richard might reach across the room and choke Parag out if I wasn't in the room.
He could do it, by the way.
Yeah. But it was pretty smooth. Every now and then he'd go out on the balcony and he was talking to some other teams, and then we would leave. But 5 hours later, we came to an agreement.
Did you know that he talks about that, did you know even what you were negotiating, that when he was walking out of the room that he was going to be talking to other teams, one of them Seattle, because Seattle had told him, whatever other offer you get, come talk to us and see if we'll match it. So did you know that there was a possibility you could be offering a deal that he could use somewhere else?
Well, we would leave my office and we would go over to Parag's. They both look out on the deck, and we were kind of, every time we left, to kind of go try to put something together, and Parag's got a team, and we'd go back to them and try to come up with some creative ideas on how we could advance the thing. And then, I'd look out on the balcony, and the funny thing, we had it was like a hammer strength and conditioning clinic. And so there were like 300, 400 people out on our fields. And I told Sherman, he's a pretty recognizable guy, put your hoodie on, because all these people are going to recognize you. And if they blow this thing, So I knew he was calling someone. I didn't know who it was, but he was calling after the fact. I find out it was John Schneider. It was other GMs. I think Detroit was involved. But, we felt like we were getting close enough. And there were about 3 times where he said, hey, I think I'm just going to go sleep on this. And I said, Richard, we're this close. We're on, the deal Peter King wrote about. We're on the 1 yard line. Let's get this thing done. And so we had some fun with that. And fortunately, we were able to. And I think a deal where we put ourselves out there a little bit, but he gets made whole and some if he ends up being the player that he's been. So I think it's a very fair deal, and I thought he did a great job representing himself.
GM John Lynch of the 49ers is with us on the phone. And, John, there are so many fascinating things about this deal that you made with Richard Sherman, just how it was playing back and forth. And you mentioned the Peter King article where Richard said, yeah, I've been on the 1 yard line before and it didn't quite work out, talking about the Malcolm Butler interception. But one of the things you said I find is fascinating there, and I really hadn't thought about it the first time I read about the deal that you had with Aqib Talib. You basically said, hey, we have a trade that if you could force the player to do, you would make him honor. Not only did you not do that, but now you're okay with him going to a division rival in the Rams. So is there going to be a time next year if he picks off Jimmy Garoppolo, are you going to be saying, man, I should have made sure that trade went through?
I mean, we Aqib's a pretty headstrong guy.
No doubt.
I've got a lot of respect for him, and I still do. So, as much as we tried to change his mind, he was pretty firm with what he wanted. And, at some point, we want people that really want to be a part of us. And I think we could have played hardball and had him just sit there and, all those things. But at that point, it didn't make sense. And we said, hey, we've got to move on from this. We handed it back over to John and said, go figure out something that, you take them back out to the market. And I think that's just a philosophy that we have. And it's the way it worked out, and we feel good about that now because of the fact that Richard Sherman was out there. Otherwise, we would have been dipping into free agency, and we would have come out with someone. We needed a corner, but we're pleased with the guy we came out with.
Well, as they say in dodgeball, that's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for you. I mean, because you're going to see him twice a year, man.
Yeah, no doubt. Those Rams, they're building something special. This division is going to be fun to play in for years to come. We try to focus on ourselves and obviously understand, like what I was speaking about with Donald, and hey, you better be good in the interior. But otherwise, we just try to focus on getting ourselves better each and every day, and feel like we're doing a good job of that, and understand that the work is just starting, but we're excited about what we're building here for sure.
Yeah, the Rams are building well, but you guys, no doubt, are building well as well. And let's talk about your process of building. You were a guy that comes in the league in '93, and we all know your style of play. You did knock a person out, though. You were an old school type of player in the game in the '90s. And in today's game, so now from the GM spot in the game of today, are you for lack of a better term, where are you in like the whole Moneyball, like new era of how to build teams as opposed to how it was, quote unquote, back in the day?
Well, we have, when I came in, you think about where we are, we're at in the, kind of the epicenter of innovation, and the Niners have always been known as a team for innovation. And so we've got people like Parag, who handles our cap, but also kind of looks over our strategy. And so we've got a great research and development. I call it analytics. They don't like that. They like research and development.
R&D.
But I think the previous regime wasn't really using them. I figure as long as they're here, let's see what they can bring. And we've found, that it's been incredibly valuable. We've tried to kind of intertwine them in our scouting process. Kyle's bought into that. And so we are using that. But ultimately, we look at the film. And one of the things, as I mentioned, Kyle has a great and his staff, they've been together for a long time. They've run the same system. So they've been able to articulate to me and to our scouting, our front office, our scouting staff, here's the characteristics we're looking for at each position. And I think the same on defense. Robert Saleh came from that Seattle tree, and so they have a real good understanding. I always felt like that's why we were able to build such a great defense down in Tampa. We did the same thing for years, and when you do that, you look at teams like Pittsburgh. They've been running the same defense forever. They know exactly what they're looking for. So I think that's been a big advantage. We got to continue to make that as such. And then the way we're working as a front office with our coaches, it's something Kyle and I signed up for, to do this thing together. And I think we've had great collaboration. And if we can continue to do that, I think we can continue to get better. And we got in this thing to win championships, and we're building towards that. It's not a finished product by any means, but we do feel like we're getting better, and that there's a really exciting vibe going on here.
Well, John Lynch with us, the GM of the 49ers. Things are moving in the right direction, but I do have to ask you about linebacker Reuben Foster out of Alabama. Look, John, he was a guy there's no doubt you put on the film, and he can make every play, but he came into the league with a little baggage, and some of that baggage is now spilled over into his NFL career. How are we monitoring what's going forward with Reuben Foster?
Well, we're monitoring it closely. We've had some really frank discussions with Reuben. Unfortunately, a lot of these things happen in the off season when we aren't allowed to touch these guys, and that's not an excuse. It's just a reality. During the season, Reuben was great. His biggest issue during the season was staying healthy, but when he was on the field, he's a difference maker. He's put himself in a couple of situations that you can't put yourself in. We're gonna hold off judgment and let the legal process kind of work itself out. But Reuben's really working on improving himself such that he's equipped to make these decisions as to who he's surrounding himself with, what kind of situations he's putting himself in. We're going to let that play out, but we believed in Reuben when we drafted him, and we really want to right now, but he's got to make some strides as well, and I think he's working hard to do that, and we'll see where that all ends out. But that's part of the deal. The draft, all these things aren't an exact science. You do your best to make good decisions, and the idea that you're going to, have 53 choir boys, that just doesn't, it's not a reality. But you do have to have men of character, and it's something we stress. We look for that, and we really felt, when we drafted Ruben, he grew up tough. But when you talk to people at Alabama, he's one of the leaders. He made people, like I talked about Jimmy, he makes people around him better. But you also have to conduct yourself in a way off the field. And Ruben understands that. And like I said, he's working hard towards that.
Well, we'll see how that plays out going forward, and we'll see how the new look 49ers play out going forward, as you guys have been all in making all kinds of moves this offseason. John, as always, we appreciate you being with us, my friend.
Thanks, John.